The films The Final Quarter, created by Ian Darling, and Incarceration Nation by Dean Gibson, both explore how authorities have negatively influenced Indigenous communities and ruined their experiences in a new cultural frontiers. Furthermore, the films highlight how power protects and facilitates the actions of the authorities. Cultural frontiers involve a transition for individuals from one area into another, where they may experience prejudice because of colour or race, travelling across boundaries into new societies.
The Final Quarter and Incarceration Nation specifically address the Indigenous Australians crossing into a colonialised world, making the two texts and ideas interchangeable. The comparative investigation of these texts underline the similar struggles that Indigenous people face in different aspects of their lives. Cultural frontiers can be influenced by past stereotypes and historical events. However, literature can bring these stereotypes to light, exposing the flaws within these racist values.
The Final Quarter ventures into Adam Goods' journey in the AFL and his battle against prejudice. We will be focusing on minimal repercussions for those in AFL authoritarian positions after racial vilification of Adam Goods, shedding light on how power shields authorities and therefore facilitates their actions against the Indigenous minorities. In this film, Adam Goods crosses a boundary into the Australian sporting world in which he is faced with criticism due to his proud Aboriginal heritage. This film expresses his journey into cultural frontiers through his battle against Eddie Maguire and Adam Jones.
The AFL's response to Eddie Maguire's slip of the tongue relating Adam Goods to King Kong is a key contributor to the notion of authorities not being held accountable for their racially vilifying actions. The primary techniques in this scene, a montage of reporters and chief executives showing the contrast in opinion between AFL high-ups and the opinions of experts and news presenters. A critic claims that if it's from a 13-year-old, it's racism, but if it's from a football club president, it's a gaffe. Not many examples highlight the sheer contrast and disposition that Australia shares. Our second scene from the expository documentary The Final Quarter references how the AFL responded to the racial remarks made by Eddie Maguire at the premiere of King Kong. The film scrutinises the actions taken by the league and the impact that responses had on Adam Goods and the broader Indigenous community. Furthermore, Andrew Demetrio, AFL chief executive, defending the actions of Eddie Maguire, highlights how power protects authorities and facilitates further actions due to the minimal repercussions. A close-up on Andrew during the interview reveals the lack of emotion and expression as he condones the racist behaviour of Eddie Maguire, president of the Collingwood Club, underlining the nature of authorities as they abuse and manipulate their power over Aboriginal Australians.
Incarceration Nation uncovers themes of negative government intervention, as this documentary ventures into the treatment of Aboriginals in the 1790s and the effect it had on the prison system, as well as focusing on the minimal efforts taken by the government to prevent future incarceration.
3.2% of the Australian population are Aboriginals, while they take up 33% of prisoners. This is because of a number of reasons, such as historical discrimination and dispossession, which had a profound impact on their health. Education and economic opportunities. The Australian government's history in Australia post-settlement and their handling of the current situation has led to the ramifications in Aboriginals and their cultural frontiers. Stolen wages were a significant factor in slavery present in Australia during the 1790s. Aboriginal women were sent out by government with no pay and forced to work for white employers. Station owners and stockmen with no education and malnourished, portraying the unjust use of power held over Aboriginal communities. This scene shines a light on the hidden slavery in Australia, as the government paid the Aboriginal workers, then stole their wages to build economy and infrastructure. Archival footage is shown to reveal the abusive treatment of these workers and the effect this had on them as they crossed this cultural frontier into a new colonialized society. An expert interview was also conducted to further reveal the magnitude of slavery in Australia. Our second scene on Incarceration Nation informs the audience of how the Australian government refuses to acknowledge the severity of slavery in the 1790s and the effect it had on Aboriginal communities. Scott Morrison states there was no slavery during settlement Australia, despite all footage and sources telling us otherwise. Scott Morrison tells the audience that his relatives were on the Second Fleet, encouraging the audience to overestimate his expertise and believe what he says. There was no slavery. In this scene, a photo of an Indigenous maid is revealed. A midshot is used in this image, making connotations to a mugshot, highlighting how she is defined by her job, as well as how she is trapped, almost as if she's in prison. Additionally, the contrast between her white clothes and dark skin remind us of the nature of segregation and the reality this has on those affected.
The information we are presented across the abuse of power held over Indigenous Australians as they cross into new cultural frontiers. The casualness of racism has found a way into Australian society that,
You have to try and prevent the best you can. Furthermore, small things such as everyday racism being cut out will allow for a significantly more peaceful and cooperative Australian community, one that we should strive for in years to come.